I'm Shahara. I'm with the California Homeless Youth Project, and this week we released Pushing Back Against School Pushout, Student Homelessness and Opportunities for Change. So it's about the school-to-prison pipeline and how that impacts homeless students in California and across the country. Hey, cool, I have extra time here on this slide. You can follow us on social media. Great. Okay, so what is the school-to-prison pipeline? I'm just going to get into the next slide. You know, it's kind of when punitive policies push students out of the education system and into the juvenile justice system. And this looks like things like zero tolerance policies and willful defiance. It encompasses discriminatory enforcement of rules on marginalized students, and it leads to less educational accessibility for these students. So things like willful defiance are kind of used as a catch-all and are really disproportionately target certain communities I'll talk about in one of the next slides. But students experiencing homelessness are twice as likely to be suspended for willful defiance as other students. So school resource officers are kind of a conduit into the school-to-prison pipeline, one of the many. One of the things that was interesting to me in this report was that they first entered schools, police officers first entered schools after desegregation, the year that schools were required to comply with Brown versus Board of Education. So knowing that history for me was really important because I think it speaks to kind of the racially charged fears, the racism in our society, and that desire to have police presence on campus. So school resource officers aren't trained. They're not like trained in youth development. This disproportionately targets students of color, LGBT youth, students with disabilities, and foster youth, all of which are overrepresented among the population of students experiencing homelessness. And that disproportionate disciplinary action means unequal access to education. That's super problematic. And what we see is that classism, racism, and sexism is often coded into school policies. It's not listed explicitly, but it does really negatively impact especially homeless students. You know, things like not being able to have rest, access to hygiene, transportation, all of that impacts student behavior, which also can impact that kind of disciplinary strategies. I want to point out that almost 15,000 students who were homeless in California were suspended in the 2016-17 school year, and over 300 were expelled. We really want to limit that kind of thing because we know that school is a source of stability for young folks, and they feel like education can be a pathway out of poverty. But many barriers like this one stand in the way. So trauma, which many of these students face, can really impact our behavior, right? This access like our fight or flight response. It can mean that we respond to things in different types of ways from other young people that don't have trauma. And we respond in punitive ways instead of empathetic ways. We really do more harm than good. So these young folks sometimes have difficulty trusting teachers or other faculty. The ramifications are huge. We know that if a student isn't able to get their GED, that is the greatest predictor of homelessness or their high school diploma, and that they're more likely to end up unemployed, homeless, or in prison if they don't have a high school diploma. So lower graduation rates and things like this, these are things that our schools care about. Their funding means that we have to have students in schools, so the negative implications on a student and on the school system itself are huge. And most importantly, we have better ideas. These kinds of things are all alternatives to the school-to-prison pipeline and punitive policies, and they serve to engage students in the campus community rather than disengage them from the campus community. So things like restorative justice and trauma-informed schools are things for us to look into. Great, okay. I was like, sometimes I don't have enough time, and sometimes I have too much. But yeah, it's important to know that we do have better ideas. So here's just a couple of the recommendations that we have in our report. So looking at policies with the lens of these students and making sure that they aren't being punished based on their housing status or race or gender or ability. We need to fund professionals who know about the developmental needs of these young people, entirely move away from zero tolerance policies, which are not evidence-based. And the irony for me for our education system to engage in a practice that is not evidence-based, I think, is ridiculous. So these students need advocates. And having like a homeless liaison know when a homeless student is being expelled is one way to advocate for that student so that doesn't happen. please do feel free to keep in touch. You can find our report on our website, or if you go to CA Homeless Youth right now, that's up. So feel free to retweet it and share, and initiate that community dialogue in your community about how the school to prison pipeline impacts homeless students, because that's not something I hear often enough, which is what led this year-long research project. So I hope you do get to check out the full report. Thanks so much.